Hello guys, welcome back to the Vocal Podcast and thank you for tuning in. I just want to start today by saying welcome back everybody, welcome back to the Vocal Podcast. I hope you guys are excited to start a new season as I am, and I'm happy to see you here, and thank you again so much you guys for the support, the consistency. I appreciate it so much, and welcome to season 2 of the Vocal Podcast. So in my last podcast I talked to you guys about dehumanization. I talked a little bit about the Stanford prison experiment. I talked about George Floyd and how that kind of applies to our current day situation. If you guys like the idea of that and the sound of that, please check it out. Right, I'm going to just jump right in there. Today's theme is empathy versus sympathy, and looking at that in 2021 and what that means and how important it is, where it comes from. So I hope you guys enjoy. So, empathy follows a golden rule, which is to treat others as you wish to be treated. It's defined as an understanding for what someone else is feeling. Whereas sympathy is the idea of doing something because you're expected to do it, which is the idea of knowing what someone else is thinking, not feeling what someone else is thinking. When you look at the origins of the word empathy, it comes from a Greek word, and it actually means in feeling. When you look at sympathy, from the same Greek origin, it means with feeling. Sympathy is often doing or saying what is expected for you to do, which is why, people give a lot of sympathy cards. It's not called an empathy card. So, how I love talking about, the psychology and back in caveman days and our inherent instincts and stuff like that. So back in caveman days, empathy, was very important. It was very important for our survival, right? It was imperative because we had to understand each other, right? Empathy allows us to form and to build relationships. Even animals can feel a certain amount of empathy. I don't know if you guys have ever seen videos of dolphins saving babies that have been dropped into the ocean, or chimpanzees saving children that had dropped into zoo pens. They feel empathy because it is an instinct, it's an animal instinct. So when we are in tune with our instincts and we follow them, that triggers a response, and it's a happy response. It's normally that of dopamine, and it allows us to form and build relationships in the community that we have currently. A study was done on college students measuring their empathy, and what they noticed in that recent years that empathy has actually gone down in college students by 50%. One thing that you could blame is the social media age. When you look at the content and the constant supply of images that we are getting of poor people, of poverty, of war, and it's just common to kind of just switch off the news or just get on with your day and ignore it. It's called habituation. And when things are habituated, it almost becomes hard to have empathy. If your empathy was switched on all the time at every single moment throughout the day, your feelings would go up and down. You might even say that it's harder now in 2021 to feel empathy and to feel for every single situation that you see in front of you. But what that's meant is that when you look at things like politics and you look at things from other people's point of view, you find people that have very far left opinions and have very far right opinions not being able to empathize for each other or understand or feel what that other person is feeling, resulting in fights and wars and trolling on the internet. We are also in an age of where, caring about ourselves and putting ourselves first, is so important right now. Being selfish right now, being in your 20-something or even your teenage years is very important, because that's how you learn and you create and you learn how to know who you are and where you stand in this world. But having empathy does not mean that you are having a loss of selfishness. It does not mean that you are losing sight of yourself. In fact, when you have empathy and you are seeing others, you are actually seeing a reflection of yourself in others. When you have empathy, it widens your perspectives of the world and it allows you to be more than you see, and it opens up new channels into uncharted territories. So they tested the effects of sympathy versus empathy in a psychological experiment. It's on YouTube. It's called Soul Pancake. It was really cool, right? So basically, they told a bunch of participants that they were going to take part in a social experiment, right? And they were like, they got maybe 4 or 5 of them to come in. They all sat down. They sat there. They were like, okay, cool, I'm coming in. Oh, what a great experiment. And they sat them down in the waiting area. When they set them down in the waiting area, they told them all each that they had a parking ticket fine and that they were parked in the wrong spot, and that if they parked there for long enough, they would get a ticket. Now, the scientist of the experiment gave them 2 different options, right? One was a more sympathetic route, and one was more an empathetic route. The sympathetic route said, well, I've had a parking ticket before, and it's not that much money, and it's all right, you can get over it, kind of thing, right? The empathetic route was, yeah, I feel for you. That's not easy. That is a lot of money to pay, and I've been through that before. I understand what you're going through, and that was the empathetic route. The responses were very different. The people that reacted to the sympathy cards were more angry, and they got frustrated, and they didn't want to pay the ticket. They refused to. They said they didn't have to. Whereas those that were on the empathy team responded with a much more positive response, were more complicit, and were more willing to pay the fine. They also did a test to see how satisfied they were with their experiment before and after the experiment. And the empathy team went up, whereas the sympathy team went down. This experiment shows an example of an empathy gap within self, right? So, have you ever gone to a shop or a supermarket, right, and you've been really hungry? And because you've been hungry, you've picked up a lot of rubbish that you don't need. Like, you pick up extra chocolate bars, or you pick up extra cakes or extra sugary snacks and stuff like that, right? But then you go when you're not hungry, and then you tend to pick up the stuff that you really need and you really want at the time. The empathy gap is when you compensate, because what your body and what your brain is doing is that when you want that chocolate bar, or if you want that snack, you tell yourself, wow, I'm going to be really hungry later. And I know what hungry feels like right now, and it's not good. So let me go and pick up loads of sugary snacks and loads of cakes and loads of chocolates, because later I don't want to be feeling this kind of hunger again. Now, the problem with that is that this can lead to things like procrastination, right? We procrastinate when we don't want to face our problems, or that we feel how stressed we are about something else at the time, and we don't want to feel that stress. So right now, I just need to relax and go do something I enjoy, rather than facing this thing that is going to cause me more stress than I'm already feeling. One of the solutions is to just eat before you go shopping, or to handle your fears and stresses straight on, right? It's to fill that empathy gap by giving yourself that sort of self-love that you need, so that you're not then overcompensating and doing things that do not feel right in that moment. In this sense, it is much more important to feel empathy than sympathy, simply because it allows you to feel the true connections and the true natural urges that you have, and the true needs that you have to be better, or to fill up that gap of self-love. There are 3 different types of empathy. There's cognitive empathy, affective empathy, and compassionate empathy. Cognitive empathy is the ability to understand what someone else is thinking. So it's not about feeling it. It doesn't involve being emotional, having emotional engagement. It's just recognizing, okay, yes, this person is upset. I can see that. That is cognitive empathy. There's a common misconception in, with people and cognitive empathy, because they say that psychopaths can't feel empathy and stuff like that, but it's not true. Cognitive empathy is something that can be felt by someone with socio or psychopathic tendencies. They can see and understand what someone else is thinking. What differs, however, is the emotional empathy and the compassionate empathy. So emotional empathy is the emotional response to what someone else is thinking, right? It's feeling what that person is feeling and really taking that in and being able to respond with an emotion, right? Whereas compassionate empathy is responding based on emotional responses. So when somebody comes at you crying, right, it can be automatic for you to want to comfort them, or to hold them, or to tell them stuff, Whereas a psychopath will stop and think and be like, oh, he's upset, right? I need to do this. Whereas some people will be, okay, I just need to help that person automatically. But I'm not saying anyone that doesn't feel emotional empathy is a psychopath. I am not a therapist or a psychologist of any sort. But it's important to learn and to understand empathy, because I generally don't think people naturally have all kinds of empathy. I think empathy, just like wisdom, knowledge, and all these things, can be developed, right? Kids have to be taught not to snatch something out of someone else's hand if it doesn't belong to them, because that other person might feel upset. So I think some levels of empathy can be learned, and it's very important in this climate. If we all learn how to truly understand and listen and really feel what other people are feeling, there might be less bridges, less walls, less conflicts, and it would be easier to sit next to someone, who had a completely opposite and opposing view to you, if we didn't take it as if it was an attack. So here are some signs that you are empathetic. I'm just going to read a list, right? So the first one is you're really good at listening to what other people have to say. People often tell you about your problems. You are good at picking up on how other people are feeling. You often think about how other people feel. Other people come to you for advice. You often feel overwhelmed by tragic events. You try to help others who are suffering. You are good at telling when people aren't being honest. You sometimes feel drained or overwhelmed in social situations. You care deeply about other people. You find it difficult to set boundaries in your relationships with other people. So it's important. I feel like every one of those points is something that you can develop on. I mean, becoming a good listener doesn't happen overnight, but it can do, Trying to help other people that are suffering can easily be taught and learned and understood, Being selfish and being an empath are not complete opposites. Okay, so I'm just going to end this podcast with a quote from a Chinese philosopher called Chuang Tzu. Right. So he stated that true empathy requires listening with the whole being. The hearing that is only in the ears is one thing. The hearing of the understanding is another. But the hearing of the spirit is not limited to any one faculty, to the ear or to the mind. Hence, it demands the emptiness of the faculties. And when the faculties are empty, then the whole being listens. There is the direct grasp of what is right there before you that can never be heard with the ear or understood with the mind. Thank you guys for listening. This has been the Vocal Podcast. I hope you guys like, share, subscribe, and also if you guys have anything conflicting about what I said, if you agreed with anything, please let me know in the comments. Message me on Instagram. I love the debate. I love the argument. I love all of it. So, we're all here trying to empathize with another, widening our perspective, listen and learn. So, yeah, thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a good evening.